Hello, my bookish friends. Can I ask you a question? Do you like murder? Murder mysteries, of course, because in this video, we're taking a look at 10 quite diverse murder mysteries in the sense of their style. And if you love murder mysteries or want to read more of them, then you might find something worth reading in this list. So without further ado, let's dig in, shall we? The first mystery on our list is the oldest one, and it is The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux. That's right, the author who wrote The Phantom of the Opera. Did you know he wrote murder mysteries too? This was the second ever locked room mystery book that I read, the first being Hollow Man by John Dickson Carr. And Dickson Carr said that The Mystery of the Yellow Room was, in his opinion, the best work ever written in murder mystery. In fact, this book also appears in a few other books. Hercule Poirot makes reference to The Mystery of the Yellow Room. So, the story is Locked Room. Mathilde Stangerson, the daughter of Dr. Stangerson, they live in a castle, is found comatose and beaten almost to death inside a room which only has one entrance and exit. Now, the room was locked from the inside, and when they break in, well, she's there comatose on the floor, almost dead, but there seems to be no way in or out other than this door. And in fact, someone was on the other side of the door. So how did the attempted murderer do it? Enter the amateur sleuth now, Joseph Whodunits, I think his name is, or Tabil. It's been a while since I read this. He begins to investigate, looking at various different people, you know, the concierges of the castle that they live in, the gameskeeper, many others. And he gets into a bit of a friendly competition with the Chief Inspector Lassan from the Sûreté. And so the book progresses. But although she's not killed, more attempts are made on Mathilde's life and someone does get murdered. How does it all work out? And how on earth could the initial attack have taken place when it was in a locked room from the inside? This comes up with a great denouement at the end, you know, quite a flamboyant, not Hercule Poirot style, but a more public version of exposing the killer, and a really good all-round book. So that's the first one, The Mystery of the Yellow Room by Gaston Leroux. The second murder mystery on our list is written by a great murder mystery writer, very respected in her day, and yet forgotten by most people. Unless you're an aficionado of the murder mystery genre, you may not have heard of this writer, and yet she was the doyenne in the murder mystery genre of her day, and it is Marjorie Allingham. Now, this is The Crime at Black Dudley. And what a great classic style murder mystery this is. So you have George Abershaw, who is part of the detective. He's invited down to Black Dudley, this mansion in the middle of nowhere, with a bunch of friends to stay over the weekend. While they're there, they go into the big stately room, what's called the Great Hall of what would be a castle. And at one end you can see this big shield, in the middle of which hangs a dagger called the Black Dudley. And a story is told on the first night about the dagger itself, and how there's a lot of mystique around it and a ritual, because back in the 1500s someone had been found murdered with the black dagger, Black Dudley, in their heart. Now, back in those days, it was believed that if a murderer touched the weapon that was used to kill someone, that weapon would become covered in blood as it was at the crime. And so, back in the 1500s, the Lord Petrie of the area, he got all of the household together and passed the dagger from one to the other to hold on to it. And records show that the dagger betrayed the murderer. And so it had become a ritual in the family, to the point in this day when all the guests have met at Black Dudley, the behaviour or the rite goes that all the lights will be turned off, and the head of the Petrie clan would in the dark, hand the black Dudley dagger to the first person they bumped into. And then, for 20 minutes in the dark, people would run around passing the dagger on to anyone they met in the dark. After 20 minutes, the lights come on and whoever has possession of the dagger has to do a forfeit, either pay some money to everybody or give everybody a kiss, something like that. Well, that's what they decide to play right at the beginning of the book. And you can guess what happens with the black dagger, the black Dudley. Yes, a murder is committed. And so begins the crime. So begins the hunt for who did it. But people can't escape from the manor. There are secret passageways in this and good old bad villains and scares and all that kind of stuff. It's a real classic romp of a murder mystery. And if you like that kind of thing and you love murder mysteries, you really should read Marjorie Allingham, because she is great at what she does. Albeit not as realistic as some other writers, but still absolutely great fun. So that was the second one on our list, The Crime at Black Dudley by Marjorie Allingham. It's almost impossible to have a murder mystery list of books without mentioning Agatha Christie herself, but it was which one to put on this list. And I ended up opting for Cards on the Table. Have you heard of this one? It's a Hercule Poirot novel. So, we've got a character called Mr. or Monsieur Shaitana. And he's quite rich and he holds these soirees and gathers people together to see and be seen. But he's a collector of curiosa, of esoterica. And amongst all the many things that he's gathered in his collection, he tells Poirot one day that he collects not just murder weapons, but murderers. And he invites him to a soiree that evening of 8 people. 4 of them, Shaitana says, are murderers. The other 4 are in their own way detectives. And he asks them all to play bridge. The 4 murderers play bridge in one room and the 4 detectives play bridge in another room. Now Shaitana is sat by the fire in the same room as the murderers. When the time comes and they've finished their games, the detectives come into the main room and lo and behold, Shaitana is dead in his chair. But no one saw who did it. And so begins Poirot's attempt to work out which of the 4 clearly did kill Monsieur Shaitana. It's just such a simple idea, and it's so delicately worked out, and the feeding in of backstories and the use of investigation, all very, very good. So if you like Agatha Christie and you're wondering which one to read next, Cards on the Table is a great pick. The next murder mystery on our list is by another great crime writer who doesn't get enough love or mentions on YouTube, and it is Death of an Author by E.R.C. Lorac, Edith Lorac. Now, not only a great writer, but something interesting here. There is a genre of murder mystery, as you know, and you can play it by the book. You can sort of just design a plot. You know, murder takes place, get the backstory of different people, solve the murder. But a lot of writers wanted to become a little more literary in their writing, to sort of add a bit more than just the classic stage drama of a murder mystery with cardboard characters. And Lorac was one of them. In this book, it is a great, great mystery. We have a reclusive writer called Vivian Lestrange, and writes really popular novels. I believe they're murder mysteries as well. But no one knows who Vivian Lestrange is. And then he goes missing. And we're told, the police are told by his secretary, Eleanor Clark, that he's gone missing and that she suspects something is foul play kind of thing. But how do you go about doing an investigation of just a missing person? Well, the inspector, the local police inspector and Scotland Yard, so you have Detective Bond and Detective Warner, they begin to investigate and they find some clues which lead them to think that maybe something is quite wrong. But this is like a murder without a body. And yet they are convinced a murder has taken place. But what about Eleanor Clark, the secretary? Could she be trying to get more book sales and it's actually her who is Vivian Lestrange? Or what about the missing housekeeper? How about other authors who appear in the book who seem to be rather odd and somewhat untraceable? And so the story progresses. And for a long time, you can't work out how they're going to come to some kind of conclusion. It's a very well crafted and intriguing book, but added to the mix is just a thin slither of commentary on the literary circles of Lorac's day. The idea that people who write, you can identify whether they're a male or a female writer, is something that comes up in this book repeatedly. And so it's taking the murder mystery, but also speaking to a situation that's known to authors in their field. So that was the next one. It's E.R.C. Lorac's Death of an Author. So the next book on our list is probably the most unusual pick on the list. It's by the author P.D. James, who you may have heard, like a renowned author, and this is the first of her Dalgliesh novels. The Dalgliesh detective is, 14 books in that series? And the one I want to recommend is the very first one, Cover Her Face. Now, P.D. James herself said that this was her least favourite book, so why do I recommend it? Well, quite simply because, one, it introduced you to the Dalgliesh novels, and the very next book, Murder in Mind, is absolutely brilliant. But what P.D. James does so well is how she strips in this book the sensationalism out of the murder mystery. There's something very ordinary about it. It reminds you of, Inspector Morse in some respects. You start the book with, is it the Maxies? Again, I can't remember. It's been a while, but you've got Mrs. Maxie. She has Martingale, I believe, is the name of the country house in a little village in Essex. And you start just at a dinner table with the whole family. They're quite hoi polloi. You've got Mrs. Maxie there, then you've got her son, Stephen, you've got a daughter as well, and you've got the woman who operates the home for unmarried mothers, which Mrs. Maxie sponsors. And then serving at the table is a girl who has come from that home for unmarried mothers, Sally Jupp. Now, I don't want to give anything away here. Obviously, this is a murder mystery, but you won't know from the beginning who it is that's going to get murdered. And then what P.D. James does so well is just this slowness of development of characters. You do begin to believe each character has a life of their own, and that's not always done in murder mysteries. Murder mysteries are quite notorious for more cardboard characters because it's more about the plot than the character. And then a murder takes place. Many things make you wonder how it was done. A ladder at the window suggests a very obvious method. But nonetheless, you're left just listening to the stories of different people, and then how the victim, how they had an impact on different people, why they were actually so hated. I'm not going to say any more. I've given nothing away there about even who is found dead, let alone who did it. So that was the next one. Again, not the greatest of P.D. James books, but I do think it's worth starting there to get used to a certain style. All the books beyond that, arguably, are better than the first one. But you then progress through the growth of Dalgliesh as a detective. And you probably enjoy Murder in Mind if you've gone through the first one. Okay, next up on the list is an absolute stonker of a murder mystery book. It's a really famous one as well. It is Double Indemnity by James McCain. Have you read this book? It's really famous. It's been turned into a film, etc. Double Indemnity is a tense read for a totally different reason than normal. Because normally you have a detective, they find a body, well, the body's found, a detective's called in, they work things out, and then maybe things go bump in the night and either another murder's coming or the detective's going to get done in. That kind of thing. Double Indemnity is done from the side of the villain. In the story, what's his name? Walter Huff. He's an insurance salesman and he goes to visit a man called Nerdlinger who works down the mines. He's an important character and he wants to get him, new car insurance. Mr. Nerdlinger's not in, but his young wife is in. I think her name is Phyllis Nerdlinger. And she starts talking to Walter Huff and then starts asking about getting life insurance for her husband. Now, the alarms go off for Walter. He knows well enough from his experience in insurance what she's thinking about, as in insuring her husband, then bumping him off for the money. But she's so attractive and he's so drawn to her and lusts after her that he ends up deciding to help her and explains if you're going to take insurance out on your husband and kill him, then there are ways you do it. There are big red flags which come up in these situations for insurance companies. And so with his knowledge, they set about the plan. That's not giving anything away. The genius of this book is the execution of the plan. And then imagine being the antagonist, the person who does the murder, with all of your planning, and then you have to watch patiently and coolly as people try to investigate whether the man's death was foul play. And you can listen, because you're inside the insurance company doing the investigation, you can listen to what everyone's saying. It's so unnerving, even though, you know, you shouldn't be rooting for a bad guy. Nonetheless, listen, it's just that tension of cat and mouse, and it's an absolutely brilliant read. I highly recommend. You can read this in one sitting quite easily. It's a really good book. Double Indemnity by James McCain. For those of you who are paying attention, it wasn't James McCain, it was James M. Cain. So just thought I'd make that correction, because I'm sure loads of people will tell me down below. And by the way, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. It takes seconds to do, and yet makes a massive amount of difference for me putting the effort in. So our next book is a book very close to my heart. I actually read it with my wife on our honeymoon, and we got so engrossed in it, we read it in one day, back and forth to each other, and it is Gallows Thief by Bernard Cornwell. Yes, Bernard Cornwell, famous for the Sharp novels and more recently his Anglo-Saxon and Viking novels. So, Gallows Thief is just a race against the clock murder mystery, because we're set in the 1700s, I believe, and the protagonist is one Ryder Sandman. He's a captain, former captain in the British forces. There has been a murder of a Countess Avebury, and a man, a painter called Cordray, has been found guilty of the crime and is due to be hung. However, Cordray's mother has written to the Home Office and said, I don't believe he's, guilty. He's very much innocent. And so one of the lords says, oh, well, we'll just appoint an investigator. He's got so much time before the execution takes place. And that's how Ryder Sandman gets the job. The thing is, Lady Avebury, she had been sitting for Cordray for a painting. Her husband had set that up, and she had been killed brutally and assaulted. Cordray's palette knife was found on her. It seems really open and close case. And Ryder Sandman, he's not exactly the set the world on fire kind of character. He's a pretty miserable, desultory kind of character. However, just asking a few questions, he realises the story isn't exactly as it's been told, and he begins to talk to a few more aristocrats, and something comes up called the Seraphim Club. Now, whether that actually features or is factors into the killing or is a red herring, you'll have to start working out yourself. But the great thing about this is that, typical of Bernard Cornwell, once he gets the base laid, he gets up a speed very quickly, and he can hold your attention. If you've ever read the Sharp novels, he can hold your attention and keep you turning those pages, and it's no different in this book. Added to the fact, it is a race against the clock. If you don't solve the murder, the person dies. And actually the phrase gallows thief was an old London slang term for someone who rescued a person who was going to be executed. You've thieved from the gallows, which was supposed to take its prey. A really good book, and I can't remember how it was done or who did it, so I should go back and read it, I suppose, because when I read this was about 20 years ago. But there you go, Gallows Thief by Bernard Cornwell. Okay, the next book on our list, maybe my favourite one on the whole thing. Quite a number of writers have said this is the best murder mystery, or at least in the top 10, 20 murder mysteries ever written, and it is Tokyo Express. It's a Japanese work. Again, you can read it quite quickly. Now, despite being thin, The detail in this, oh, it just drags you on and on. Every page, slowly but inexorably, you have to know what happens and how it's done. There's no wasting time. Very quickly, we're introduced to a young couple, a young girl and a man, who are found dead on a beach on one of the main islands of Japan. And it seems to be a suicide pact. And it's written off as that by the police. But one detective there, he has just a few questions. Something doesn't sit right with him. What's wonderful, though, is although it's a hunch, he knows that actually overall most things do point to this being a suicide pact. Later, though, a young inspector from Tokyo gets in touch with him and asks questions about this suicide pact. Well, they begin to trace information, and the whole thing begins to revolve on train timetables. I'm not going to say more about that because nothing of itself is enough to prove their hunch is correct. But none of the details they find are significant enough to make them drop their hunch. And it's just a clever piece by piece by piece drawing together of individual facts which on their own don't say anything and somehow don't quite connect with each other, but raise the doubt higher and higher into the conclusion of the police. And it's almost a case of the person they expect it could be the murderer couldn't possibly have done it, which really throws you a curveball as the reader. It is such a wonderful, wonderful piece of work. Like I say, maybe my favourite on this list. There is one coming which I also really love. So that is Tokyo Express by Seicho Matsumoto. The penultimate book on this list of murder mysteries is from a great, unbelievably gifted author, and that is The Ministry of Fear by Graham Greene. Graham Greene seems to be able to write anything he likes. He'll write in all kinds of genres. Now, The Ministry of Fear is strange because it's a murder mystery running up against a line of spy novels. Not so much thriller, but it's got that kind of feel of international espionage to it, but not James Bondish. It is a murder mystery. So our main character, check this out for a brilliant start. Arthur Rowe, who has just come out of prison. You will find his backstory in the book. It's explained. He's in war-torn London during the bombings, and he goes into a park where there is a fete on. He visits a fortune teller there, and the fortune teller, oddly enough, gives him the weight for a cake which is part of a competition outside, which is guess the weight of the cake. So he goes out with this information, goes to the cake stand, guesses the weight correctly because of the fortune teller. And when he wants to leave with the cake later in the day, people say, oh no, there's been a mistake, you're not to have the cake, but he won't let them do that. He won it fair and square, he says, and so he takes the cake away. He then goes home where a man calls on him who wants to buy the cake. Why? What's so important about this cake? And then when he doesn't agree, something happens. Now a murder is involved later on as well. And Arthur Rowe is in danger and needs to get to the bottom of it. But it's a very unusual, tilted, angled narrative. You know Hitchcock, when he used to tilt on the angle on a hallway so you saw people walking at an acute angle? That's what this book feels like. Everything about it is off. But trying to piece it all together, it goes where you wouldn't expect it to go. And it is a really, really interesting read. Now, it won't be everyone's favourite. If you've never read Graham Greene, would I suggest you start with this? Probably not, actually. But nonetheless, if you like murder mysteries, you like unusual angles, even he gives you an uneasy feeling just by the style of writing, which again, he's got this masterful ability to change his style as well. But that is I find that if you're interested in different kinds of murder mysteries, and that's part of the reason for this list, is to get a different assortment of styles, then Graham Greene's The Ministry of Fear is probably the most peculiar one on this list, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The 10th book on our list is the one that rivals Tokyo Express for being my favourite on the list, and I've talked about it in another video elsewhere in more depth. It's Morality Play by Barry Unsworth. This won the 1992 Booker Prize. I love it for the ingenuity of approach to a murder mystery. So, in the Middle Ages, bands of travelling or troupes of travelling actors would go to towns and enact a morality play. That is normally from the Bible, a famous account from the Bible, and they'd give the morality story. However, this troupe, they're headed into this snowy town, middle of depths of winter, where as they enter, they find out there's recently been a killing. A boy has been found murdered on the road coming into the town, and the whole town's astir with it, and someone's been condemned for doing the crime. The leader of the troupe says, do you know what, to get more money and make sure people come and watch us, we should make a play about the boy being killed. You know, they've worked out who it is. We'll just retell the story. Everyone will be interested. Now, that's not what you did back in the medieval days. You did the morality plays and nothing else. So they start looking into the details to make their play, and lo and behold, things don't add up. The person that's accused could have done it, but there's other questions which don't fit the narrative. Now, they're running against the clock because they've sold out the play. And then, this is the book in a whole, in its entirety really, like the idea. They begin acting in front of the city. And then, as they're talking, some of them step out of the written lines and begin saying, but it couldn't be this because X, Y, Z. And although they're staying as actors, they're talking to each other and trying to work out what really happened live in front of the town. Now, of course, that's very dangerous because you have nefarious elements who don't want the truth coming out. But at the same time, you're with the actors. They don't know where their own thoughts are going live in front of others. And they're working out the problems with the narrative and maybe using some facts to work out who really did do the murder. As a setting, as an idea, and the tension of having to do it in front of everybody, this book is fantastic. I've not read anything quite like it, and Barry Unsworth writes in such an easy to read style. He keeps you engaged all the way through. And I particularly like this one on the list, although I like quite a number of them. So, that was the last one, Morality Play by Barry Unsworth. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I know I've left out plenty. Plenty are going to mention that I've missed Edgar Allan Poe out of this list. Others will say Josephine Tay and Dorothy L. Sayers, and there's a ton that could be mentioned. I could do this over and over and over again, okay? And probably will going forward. But I just thought I'd share with you these 10 very varied, different styles, different approaches to murder mysteries, and you can pick which one sounds good to you, just for a good romp through mystery. Until the next time, I wish you joy in whatever you read.